we're not here for Hashem to serve us. We're here to serve Hashem. That's what
Mm.
we are. We are servants to bring the light and love no matter what's happening. And sometimes we're in a very, very dark place. We don't think we'll ever get out of it. At that moment that happened, and that Pesach was a horror story, I didn't think I would ever emerge from this
Mm.
with a smile again.
Mm.
So it takes time. We have to be very patient for ourselves. Something we learn in this work is to learn how to be patient.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have an incredible guest. Her name is Mrs. Yehudis Karbal, and she has been a psychotherapist for almost 40 years, way before it's become such a popular thing to be into psychotherapy. And she's got a lot of wisdom to share with us, as well as a very fascinating personal journey. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs.
Thank you,
Karbal.
Chana. Thank you
Thank you.
for the opportunity.
Thank you. So let's start at the very beginning. Your background, a little about your background before you actually became this famous psychotherapist that you are today.
I don't know if I'm so famous, but um, my background, you're talking about childhood?
Childhood, sure.
Childhood, okay. So I grew up in a conservative family, traditional, and but that was about it. And I think my childhood anxiety was just about finding direction in my life because I didn't know where to go, what to do, what's right, what's wrong. Um, I was very mission oriented. My father, Oliver Shalom, was a very mission oriented person.
What do you mean by
And
mission oriented?
uh,
What?
he just, he was a Zionist,
Mm,
and he fought for Eretz Yisrael, for the
mhm,
right to establish a Jewish state. He was a lawyer, and he was always fighting for the underdog and to
mm.
bring justice to the world. And he fought to get Jews into the United States during the Holocaust. He
Oh,
was a
wow.
fighter, so I think he translated that to all of us kids who are five, B'li Ayin Hara. And
I-
so
Is
we
there
grew
where
up.
is that where you got your idealism from to help
I think
people?
so. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
From my mom, I got a love of sports and the arts. And from my father, the mission.
The mission.
Yes, yes.
So what do you mean when you're saying you were searching for your identity? Like, what does that mean?
So just in terms of what I could devote my life to,
Mm, mhm,
something that would really hook into my own personality and my own passion.
mhm,
And so it took a while. And I believe it happened in 1976, actually, after my father died just before Pesach. And so before the Passover holiday, and everybody came to my house to sit Shiva and to do the whole mourning process. My husband and I had become more religious a few years before his death. And so when they came to me, I was the only one who was observant. And so we
mm.
spent Pesach together, and it was a very exciting time in a way because they were also searching, my siblings, my four siblings. And somebody said, well, if your siblings are asking all these questions, spiritual questions about life and death and the soul and what goes on and what's important and why are we here, why don't you call Chabad? Because they answer all the
Mm.
crazy questions. So we were living in Detroit at the time, and I did call Chabad, and they sent out a new rabbi who had just been there for a year or two, Rabbi Silverberg, who built up the community in West Bloomfield. And he came and he sat down with all of us. It was during Cholamoid Pesach, during the intermediary days of Pesach. And he started answering questions. And he said, why don't we just start a Tanya Shiur here? And he
Mm.
did. And that summer, he sent my husband and I, and we took two of our kids with us to Morristown, New Jersey, which is a very famous place, a big yeshiva there. He wanted us to learn more about Hasidus. And my sisters, he sent off to Rabbi Friedman in Beis Chana in Minnesota. And then another sibling went to New York, found his way there, and another sister went to California, found her way there. And the interesting thing is that by my father's the anniversary of his death, the first anniversary, the first yahrzeit, all of my siblings had become from,
Wow, they all became religious. Wow.
all became religious, right? right.
What do you think it like was pulling them all and pulling you? Like, I'm curious
I
what you
think
found so compelling.
Hasidus is such an incredibly deep and high level spiritually and psychologically. We're kind of all psychological in my family. So it really answered a need. It answered the question about direction and truth. Where will you find truth in this world? And what can you attach yourself to eternally? And yeah, I found that with
So
Chabad
what do you mean
Hasidus.
when where can you find truth? Like, what did it personally answer for you? Like, what question were you struggling with that you found it so compelling?
It's such a great question. It's a long answer. It's probably still being answered right now.
Of course.
But it's just a question of how do you deal with the paradox, the paradoxes of life. Um, you know, the fact that we live in a world that's so miraculous, and we also live in a world that's so challenging. And how do you juggle? How do you find a place that's peaceful inside, dealing with all of these challenges and dealing with the dark and the light, the good, the bad, the, you know, what's meaningful, what's not. This was a way through for all of us, I could say.
Right. Wow. So how do you deal with that? I mean, there is so much darkness and so much light. How do you what's the inspiration that you find personally in your life? And I know you've gone through a lot, and we'll talk about different things that you've gone through. But how is it that you find that the answers to that?
I think it's just to be able to hold both realities in our hands at the same moment and somehow bring them together, not in a way that explains anything, but in a way that keeps me balanced and keeps me focused on the goal, which is really, you know, to bring as much light, as much love as I can possibly to this world through any kind of kindness or education that I can do myself and then bring to other people.
Hmm. Wow, interesting. How did you get into psychotherapy?
Oh, I think we were all psychologists to begin with.
Right.
In my family, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sister is a very famous psychologist. She's Miriam Adahan, and she's written many, many books on Torah and psychology. She was one of the first to actually combine and show how Hasidus is actually such an incredible derech, a special way to find ourselves, who we are, and what we're doing here. Answered a lot of questions. So in the 1980s, she wrote a book called Emet, Emotional Maturity Established Through Torah. I hope she could be the next one on your podcast here. Um, and I actually, when the book was published, I actually brought it to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and
Mm,
he said Hazman Grama, which means the time is now ripe for
mm,
such a book.
mm,
So it was the synthesis of Torah and psychology that became very meaningful. And we taught it to a lot of people. The whole Emmett method is basically, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's much more than that as well, because
mm.
it adds that other piece of Hasidus, which is to me like the icing on the cake. It brings it all together.
So, like, what would it add, for example? Can you give us an example of how
Just
you
so many things about in Torah, like it's what's encoded in the Torah, even something simple like the word regesh, which means feeling, and the word gesher, which means bridge. Those two words have exactly the same letters, and we know that when something has the same letters, they obviously are connected, whether it's through gematria, through the numerology, or through the letters. So regesh is feeling, and gesher is bridge.
mm,
When you understand someone's feeling, you automatically make a bridge to them, which is
mm,
the basis of every relationship, even our
mm.
relationship with God. Okay. So this became like a hallmark of the work that we do. Um, just the idea that we're head and heart and body, it's all one. This idea of oneness, that yes, we live in a world of duality, but our whole, how do you say, Sha'ifa, our whole way of dealing with things has to be towards trying to develop a oneness, whether it's within ourselves or within our families or our communities. So
What
we're
do you mean by
looking
that? Like, what kind of oneness are we trying to develop?
just to get away from shame, blame,
Mhm,
and judgment,
mm,
because that makes a separation, and try to be more inclusive, more incorporating, everyone and everything without the judgment.
Mm,
I found that in Hasidus, and I certainly found that in Chabad. That's very inclusive as opposed to exclusive.
mm. Wow, interesting. So how do you how do you get away from the judgment without getting away from the negative? Like, in other words, how do you call something out as wrong but not judging it?
So the Baal Shem Tov, who was, from the originators of Hasidus, the way we know it today, he said a very interesting thing. He said, when you are judging somebody else, you're actually judging yourself.
Mhm.
Well, I never like that because I think, well, I'm not so judgmental. If I think you're lazy, does that mean I'm lazy? And actually, I found out, yeah, it does mean that I'm lazy. I might be lazy to find something in you that's not lazy.
Interesting. Wow, you
Yeah.
just turned it on its head.
It
Wow.
just turned it on its head, right? So Hasidus explained so many of these ideas to me about the world, about like Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah, which means that the descent is necessary for the ascent. And we know that, physics wise, of course, if we want to go high on the diving board, we have to depress it very low and then we can go very high. The same thing happens with the soul that comes into this world. It comes down to a lower world. That's a descent, but then it's only for the purpose of making the ascent afterwards.
Mm,
So everything we do in our lifetime, from the moment we're born, is working towards ascending and making an aliyah in our lives, however we can do that. To
mm.
different people, obviously, it's going to mean different things.
Right. Wow. So do you bring faith into your practice? Do you bring faith
Totally.
in God? Totally.
I
Really?
always tell people without a philosophy, you're not going to have a psychology either. It has
Ah,
to precede psychology, it has to be a foundation. So everybody has some kind of a foundation. Sometimes it doesn't work well for them, and then we can tweak it and try to build a better foundation. But it's like building a home. You've got to build the basement first. If you don't live in
mm.
Florida, you have to build the basement first, and
Right.
then you can build the structure on top of that. So I felt like Hasidus was the basement, the ground level, the below ground level that I was working for a whole lifetime.
Wow.
And I'm always astounded that I'm just constantly learning and constantly, I mean, it propels you to do that because it's so exciting. It's a very exciting study.
Interesting. Wow. So, like I thought I heard that certain psychologists, certain fields of psychology feel you're not supposed to intermingle faith, but you're saying you do. You do totally mingle it, and
I'm
it's
a
it's a
very,
basis.
yeah, I'm a very unorthodox orthodox therapist.
Interesting. Wow. Wow.
So I
There.
just do what's good for me.
Right.
And then I'm assuming that that's what's going to be authentic and helpful to somebody else.
So, as someone who has practiced psychotherapy for 40 years and who also has such a foundation in Hasidic teachings and Torah knowledge, are you always at an equilibrium?
Always. No, no, we have what's called a lower brain. Okay, this is the emotion center in the brain. It's called the amygdala. It's scientific, and this is where the first response always comes. The first response is usually a negative response if we're triggered. We're talking about if you're triggered with something, with a person, a place, a thing, or whatever. The dinner burns in the oven. That's a trigger, and it's here. But then we have an obligation to understand that we have a full brain.
Mm,
Here we have what's called choice, because this is the prefrontal cortex, and this is where we can change a thought, a word, and an action. At all given times, we can always go from this lower brain, which wants to pull us down, gravity. It always wants to do that. And then we need to work against that. That's the challenge, and bring it up to a place where we have a choice. Actually, it's
mm,
very interesting. This is called Beta Bechira. It's called the place of choice, the home
mm.
of choice, which is actually another name for the temple. It's called Beta Bechira. I
Oh,
didn't know
wow.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
why? Because we have a choice. Here, there's no choice. Whatever hits you because you're triggered, that's just an automatic thing. Okay. So we're not responsible really for the trigger. We are responsible for what we do with the trigger.
Mm.
And
And
that's the basis of this kind of work.
and you feel that your work with Hasidus and psychology has given you the ability to make those decisions in a calm way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because there's also the issue of humility. Like, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to know the why. A lot of times in therapy, people will try to figure out the why, and they'll go through years of therapy trying to figure out, why am I having this response? Why? So a little bit of digging is important, but I think it's much more important to finally crystallize what were the losses, what were the traumas in a person's life, and then where do we go from there? Because
Mm.
sometimes I'll work with a kid who's 15 years old and he feels his life is over because of whatever trauma he's been through. And then I say, well, 15 years, so you've got like 105 to go. What are
Yeah.
you going to do for the next 105 years of your life? You can't live it according to traumas and triggers.
So how do you deal with that?
It's a question of maturity and
Hmm.
learning. It's
Hmm.
all about education. What I find most in my practice is that people simply don't have the education to understand, how does the brain work? What are the triggers?
Hmm.
How do we get away from that? How do we not stay in our own personal? It's like we know in our praying every day that we're going out of Egypt every day.
Hmm.
Okay. So this Mitzrayim, this Egypt place is right here,
Hmm.
right near the neck, by the way, which is Oref. And that also has, in Hebrew, it's Oref for neck, and it also has the letters of Paro.
Hmm.
But what does this Paro do to us? It wants us to feel negative about ourselves, about our life situation, about our past, just, you know, wallow kind of in the negativity, and or in the fear or in the depression. These are normal kinds of things that happen. It reminds me of a very funny Peanuts cartoon where Charlie Brown comes home and he says, I know life has its ups and downs. I just want the ups.
Of course. Wow,
So
who
we
doesn't want
say,
that?
right. So we say this Yerida, this going down, the descent is necessary. I have to go here first, and only then can I go up here. Some people
Right.
try to skip this altogether. They try to deny feelings, or they're ashamed of the feelings, or whatever it is. And I say, it's part of your brain. You can't deny it, and you
Mm.
can't take this piece out, because
Mm.
otherwise you wouldn't have any emotion.
Mm. But
So
but for
it's
some
kind of,
people it is hard to confront those emotions, I guess.
oh yeah, of course, for most
Yeah.
people. Why?
Right.
Because also as children, we're very, very often shut down.
Mm.
We don't know what our feelings are necessarily, and maybe there's nobody around to help us explain how we're feeling or to allow us expression. So a lot of people just decide that feelings are for the weak. You can't cry because that shows you're weak. You can't feel, that shows you something wrong with you. You're a case, you need therapy. Why are we
Mm.
therapizing the need to feel? We don't
Mm.
need to do that.
Mm.
And a lot of times that's what happens. So when kids are expressing anything, it's like right away, pop a pill, you won't have to feel that way. But
Mm.
it's important to feel. We have a mantra, what you feel, you can heal.
Mm. Wow.
So if you're only involved with a thought, there's no healing taking place.
Mm.
It's getting in touch with both areas here and allowing the feeling, staying with it, having the support to stay with the feeling, examine it, figure out what's going on, and then you can heal it.
Mm. Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. So, let's apply, I mean, those feelings to something that you've gone through in your own life. I know I mean, you've gone through a lot of different things, but one of the things that has happened to you of recent was your son-in-law passed away very tragically during COVID. And I know, and it was so sudden. I mean, I remember it. They were here in Pomona, and it was just such a
Yeah,
horrific,
horrific.
horrific, just so out of the blue. He was so healthy and all of a sudden, and then, a couple days later, he was gone.
Right.
And I know that, a mother's pain, as a mother, I know this, that sometimes it's pain when we can feel pain ourselves and we can handle that, but when we see our children in pain, that's something that's beyond.
Yeah.
It's something that's so hard to handle. How did you as a psychotherapist relate to that? As a mother, relate to that? How did you live through that? Like, what was your process? And was it so, you're talking so logically and so rationally about how you should be feeling and what you should be thinking? How did you go through that?
I'm still going through it. I can't talk about it without tearing up.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's tough. Some things are really tough and we'll never, there's no such thing as getting over. okay, when there's a close relationship, and I was very close to Shalom, Alav Shalom, and the whole tragedy
Well,
of the
t-
event.
tell us the story a little bit, like for those who are just, listening.
It was the beginning of COVID, and it was just before Pesach, and we had no idea what was going on in this world, but a lot of people were passing away,
Mm.
and it never even occurred to us that this cough that he had he would end up in the hospital. But that's what happened, and it happened pretty quickly. And all of us were traumatized. All of us were in shock. Of course, his own wife and kids more than anybody. Um, it took me a long time. This is not an automatic kind of thing. You don't snap your fingers and you come out of a really tragic, traumatic event. Uh, I remember it was like 2 days before the Seder. We couldn't even go to the funeral. There were no
Mm.
planes flying at that time, no
Mm.
transportation. Um, it was very complicated, and we watched the funeral on Zoom,
Mm.
which felt like utter cruelty, utter cruelty. And then I found myself in the supermarket. I had to go buy matzah, and I had to,
Right.
you know,
Deal with a
prepare
real life, right? It's
prepare for
crazy.
Seder. And I went to the supermarket, and I just remember standing in the middle of the aisle, crying my eyes out and saying, "Nope, I don't want to do Pesach this year.
Mm.
I really
Mm.
don't.
Mm.
Sorry, sorry, God, don't want it."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Ultimately, I had to, but with a lot of difficulty, and it took weeks. There's the way the morning goes is that there's 7 days of sitting shiva, and then there's um, the 30th day is for the shlosh. It's called the shloshim. So there are like times. Not that you can't regulate anybody's feeling, but by the time it was the 30th day, I did write an article about how I handled that death.
I remember for Chabad.org, right? You sent it
Yeah,
to
it was
me.
called A Grief Therapist Faces Grief.
Grief, right? And
Because I think that all therapy is really grief therapy. So I
what
call
does that
myself
mean? What does
it's
that
always
mean?
about loss. We're always talking about some kind of loss of vision sometimes, loss of dreams.
Mm.
Beside the actual physical loss that there is in life, there's intellectual loss, there's spiritual loss, there's people sometimes lose their belief in God, and that's
Right.
a loss, and it's very traumatic. And that feeling of loneliness or confusion or just feeling helpless and hopeless, it happens to everybody.
Mm.
So my experience, I don't think, was anything unique. It was unique to me, obviously, but these are experiences that everyone goes through in life. We have a lot of expectations and a lot of hope about how things should be, and sometimes it doesn't turn out that way.
So how does a psychotherapist deal with grief
So
or
in
or
that
loss or
article,
these loss of dreams or these like how should one go about dealing with these
right.
losses?
So the first thing is humility, to know that you don't know. The
Mm.
Rambam, Maimonides, actually says to know that you don't know is the highest form of knowledge. So that's the first thing. That, we're not here for Hashem to serve us. We're here to serve Hashem. That's what
Mm.
we are. We are servants to bring the light and love no matter what's happening. And sometimes we're in a very, very dark place. We don't think we'll ever get out of it. At that moment that happened, and that Pesach was a horror story, I didn't think I would ever emerge from this
Mm.
with a smile again.
Mm.
So it takes time. We have to be very patient for ourselves. Something we learn in this work is to learn how to be patient. We don't learn this as children, but we're going to learn it as adults, to be patient, to try to establish some kind of skills based on a firm foundation that will hold us even in the dark times.
So
We have a
how did you make Pesach that year? Like how were you? I mean, you didn't want to because
minimally, yeah,
you were
just very,
but
very
you were probably
minimally.
angry with God. Like, how am I
I
supposed
was,
to be and
I
how am I
was.
supposed to be celebrating a freedom and a liberation when I don't feel free or liberated right now?
Exactly, exactly. So that's the paradox. So I know what has to be done. And so I kind of did it robot-like.
Mm.
I felt
Mhm.
like a robot. Okay, I'll be the good girl and do what I'm supposed to do, but I don't have any feeling here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, having the courage to be real about what you're feeling is part of the healing process.
Mm-hmm.
Because people who either deny it or they try to say, oh, it's God's will, and, they try to somehow minimize the level of pain, but that's not healthy.
Well, should you be wallowing in your pain? Like, should you be wallowing in your grief? Or is there such a thing as wallow in your grief, or just let it?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, to the point of non functioning, I was still functioning.
Mm-hmm.
After Pesach, I was able to finally start functioning again a little bit. But I knew to take time for myself. I knew to try to take some self care.
Mm-hmm.
And I still had to function in this world, function with my children, with my grandchildren, and somehow be there for them as well.
Right. Be a support for them
Be a
for the loss
support.
that they, wow.
Right, exactly.
What
So
do you mean when you say self-care? Like what kind of self-care should a person take care of or do?
like learning how to breathe. We forget how to breathe sometimes. We're holding our breath or we're not even aware. So just consciousness. I didn't really want to be conscious. I really wanted to medicate myself. And I knew that that wouldn't be healthy. A lot of
Mhm.
people do that. And yeah, the first thing that when my husband he died 8 years ago. And the first thing that I was asked by the doctor is, do you want some medication?
Was that sudden? Was that a sudden death?
No, no, it was
No.
after an illness. Um, no, I didn't want medication. I want to feel everything that I'm feeling. Thank you. And not
Wow.
to worry, there's no danger in feeling. For children, there is danger for them. When they feel something, they feel that it's real. They don't know how to distinguish between feeling and fact.
Mm,
That's children. So because their brain is not yet developed, it takes 25 years for the whole brain to be developed. So children will feel that something is, very dangerous if they don't have the uniform to wear to school the next day. It's not clean, it's still in the washing machine. It's going to be like dangerous for them. They're going to
mhm.
respond that way. So it takes a while to develop the brain and to understand what's dangerous and what's not. Okay, that comes later on, obviously, in a process. It's all a process. And I used to hate the word process because I like to do things 1, 2, 6.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So what if you're overwhelmed with your emotions though? I mean, you say we can handle, but what if our emotions are so overwhelming that it just feels so out of control?
So obviously, there are many resources, hopefully, that people have either to speak to somebody, to write about it, to journal. Um, there are many avenues to you have to reach out. You can't stay isolated at a time like this, even though you want to. Not you,
Mm,
well,
mhm.
anybody
Yeah,
going
sure,
through
all of
this.
us, right?
Yeah, all of us. Um, so the
Yeah, I
tendency
think
to
that's
isolate
probably
is
that's probably the hardest thing because you
right,
have this tendency to or at least some people do. Some people reach out, but some people just go inward, and I
right.
guess that's the hardest part. I know I mean, personally, I go inward, I don't reach out,
Yeah,
and
me
that's
too.
probably the yeah.
Right,
So, like, my tendency would not be to reach out to other people, but it would be very hard for me to reach out to others,
right.
but you're saying you should.
Absolutely,
Absolutely, right.
absolutely. Because life really is with people, and it's not only helpful for the person who's going through, it's actually a gift to other people as well, so that they can feel part of what's going on and
Mm,
share. It's
mm,
really important to share,
mm,
even if it's painful. So again, I think the best thing we can do for our children growing up, as well as ourselves growing up, is to be able to feel that pain, feel the regish, the feeling, whatever it is, and to just be with it for a moment. And when you're with that regish, then that's how that bridge is made. And so
mm,
all of a sudden there's a bridge to, oh, you mean one day maybe I will feel more normal.
mm.
Okay. But again, there's a process. It's like a birth in a way. Um,
Which actually brings me to you had a traumatic event when you were birthing. Could you tell us
ah,
about that?
okay. Yeah, that's why. Yeah. So I have, Baruch Hashem, thank God I have 4 children. And the last one was born emergency cesarean.
Mm,
I didn't know it was going to be a cesarean. I'd had 3 normal deliveries. Then I went to the hospital and they told me my baby was breech. And
Mm.
I tried to fight with them on that. No, I don't have a breech baby.
Right.
Anyways, they said, well, we'll let you labor a little bit and then we'll see. We don't think you're going to be able to deliver naturally. We might have to do a C-section. And I wouldn't hear of it, of course, until 4 or 5 hours later, um, my body was in trauma and I started bleeding. And they called code blue. Do you know what
Mm.
code blue is? Code blue is like when a person's not going to be here for much longer.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I just remember the room filling up with doctors and nurses and yelling and stress. And they got me to the emergency room, to the operating room. And I thought I was dying. I did, because nobody was paying attention to me. Like they were just doing their thing, their medical thing. And when I woke up, I really thought that I had died
Mhm.
because there
Mm.
was a nurse with this white bundle saying, "Congratulations, Mrs. Karbal, you have a little boy." And I said, "No, I don't. I only have 3 girls. I don't have any boys." I was really out of it. Um, so even though that birth was so traumatic for me, and I didn't realize it for a long time, like 12 years later, I was in a class on grief therapy, and the teacher asked everybody to research a loss or a trauma in their life having nothing to do with death or divorce.
Mm.
And I said, well, what else is there? I didn't know about
Mm.
trauma. And eventually, when she interviewed each student, she found out where we could be researching, and she said, yeah, that's the experience you're going to research. And I did.
Mm.
And then shortly after that, somebody asked me if I would go with her to be her doula because her mom, who was supposed to come in, couldn't. So I went, and I loved that experience because I knew exactly what she needed because of what I had gone through. I said, a laboring woman needs somebody to hold her hand and look at her eyes and say, you're going to be fine. It's
Mhm.
going well and everything's going to be okay. And, just to give her that reassurance. So then I became a doula. Just
Mm.
as a hobby, though. It's something that I never charged for because I felt like, wow, I get to be there at, the splitting of the Red Sea. That's a miracle. I get to witness this miracle. I loved it. Yeah. But I
Wow.
also then saw therapy as a birth experience because it's always about going through a process. It's a process of really 10 months, not 9 months. They tell you 9, but it's really 10. And
Mm.
then it's the process of trusting your body and trusting the process to get through the labor and the delivery and after the delivery. So I think it really heightened my awareness of how patient I could be for the process.
Mm.
Okay. And just accept whatever was going on at the moment and try to be supportive.
Do you see, though, with therapy, like the actual birth? In other words, you're saying it's like a birth process. Do you see that
Yeah.
birth coming in? You
Yeah.
see, how does that reflect in
Just
reality?
when you see people having awarenesses and making connections and growing beyond whatever they were exposed to as children. Okay, and sometimes it really means that a person, if she didn't have a nurturing parent, then she has to become her own nurturing parent. And there's
Mm.
that aha moment where, oh, I can't blame anybody else. I have
Mm.
to take responsibility for myself. And
Mm.
that's a very high place to be in where we can be, responsible, reliable, respectful, and reasonable.
Mm.
And when a person is doing that, then he's working from here, not from here.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that's that aha moment of birth
Mhm. Mhm.
that I love to hear.
Even if you regress after that, like, even if you're not staying at
Well,
that
it's
aha,
always going to be,
up and
it's
downs, right,
4 up and maybe, 4 steps up and then 2 steps back. But at
right.
least you're going up. It's not a direct growth is not a direct line. Growth goes something like this, kind of back and forth and forth. But notice that my hand is going up, not down.
Right,
So
right.
even though it's going up and there's some side trips that I'm taking, eventually the brain gets the understanding that you're no longer living from this place. So it should be, I mean, there is a statistic on this. just like only 20% of the Jewish people left Egypt. That's a very small amount.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened to the 80%?
Mm-hmm.
They died in the plague of darkness. So it's kind of the same thing that I see in therapy, that many people stay in this very stuck place, helpless and hopeless, and negative beliefs and negative experiences and all kinds of trauma. And 20% of people then will come up here. It takes work because the brain has to be repatterned. And we know that we can develop new neural pathways in the brain by simply understanding Hasidus, which is we can always change one thought, we can change one word, we can change one action. That's,
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's the whole Hasidic philosophy, standing on one foot.
Can you give me an example of that, like how a person would do that?
Sure. Okay, I was just in Muncie. I had lived in Muncie for 3 years, and I was driving back from Monroe one night. I was doing a workshop there, and I was so tense. It was late at night. I don't like traveling at night, and especially in Muncie with the deer, because when I lived there, I had 2 accidents with deer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow. And also
and
the
that's
windy,
serious.
dark roads, right? They're
Yeah,
so windy and
dark
dark.
roads, not lit, and then all of a sudden, okay. I mean, thank God the deer, I was okay. I was not in a bad accident, but I was just nervous, and I wasn't even aware. I was definitely here. It was late, and I
When
was a
you say
little bit,
here, some people aren't seeing. So tell us when you're pointing to here.
yeah,
Wait,
to this amygdala, to this
amygdala,
point in the
the
brain,
lower
the
part.
the the emotional part,
Mm-hmm.
where I was in fear. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, what happens if a deer comes? Then nobody knows me over here, and how am I going to get home? And it wasn't even my car, and I was nervous for the person's car. Anyways, I realized where I was. Said, I'm really like driving with such fear. And then I stopped and I breathed. That's the immediate way to go from a lower place to a higher place. You breathe. And I said, there's really no danger at this moment. I'm going to go very slowly. I don't want to be driving for half an hour in fear. And then I pictured myself getting home and getting into bed.
Mm.
And so my thought was, there's no danger. My words, I speak out loud to myself. I say, good girl, look what you're doing. You're actually moving from your low brain to your high brain. So when there's no one around, I speak to myself. But if somebody's around, I do not do that.
Right. Wow.
And then my action was simply to not grip the steering wheel so fiercely. I
Right.
kind of relaxed. So
Wow.
it's a silly example, maybe,
It's a great
but
example. Right.
it shows you how every moment of the day, no matter where we are experiencing thousands and thousands of negative, self-incriminating thoughts. Thousands. They say we have between 40 and 60 a day.
Mm.
That was always a hard number for me to hear. And the Alter Rebbe says you can only have one thought at a time. So I
Mm.
prefer to go with what the Alter Rebbe says. And if I can work with one thought at a time, no matter what's going on, if I can work with that one thought and change that one thought, then I have a better chance of being able to really come up here and live a more wholesome kind of a life
Mm.
that's free of all kinds of shame and blame and judgment. Those are the three things that destroy a person's ego, destroy a healthy ego. They destroy relationship anytime there's blame, shame, or judgment. And
Mm.
that's a lifelong avoda, a lifelong work that we have.
So I want to ask you two things. First of all, like, what if there is danger? You said there wasn't danger then. What if a person isn't in danger, like in a
Oh,
dangerous situation, like they lost their job and they don't know where their next rent payment is coming from, or there's a health situation, or who knows what, you
so of
know?
course, on a scale of 1 to 10, statistically, danger is 3% of life. And the
Mhm.
rest of life, the other 97% is irritations, frustrations,
Mhm.
disappointments, expectations that aren't met, annoyances. You hear kids all the time saying, that's so annoying. That's so annoying.
Right.
It could be, but it's not dangerous.
Right.
So small children don't distinguish between danger and no danger.
Mm.
But as we get older, we begin to calm our emotional response down by saying, you know what, this is not dangerous. Like when I was driving, is
Mhm.
this dangerous? No, not really. If I'll go slowly and looking out, okay, got my half the foot on the brake, okay, I'll be okay.
Mhm.
So even though I didn't believe it at first, after a while, by the time I got home, I was not in fear.
I find that so many of us, myself included, tend to catastrophize things, like worry about things that might happen, and and think of the worst case scenarios when that might happen, or like right now it might, everyone's safe, but what if?
Look, if there's real danger, how do you know there's danger? You will have to call Hatzalah 911.
Mm,
You have to call a doctor, a rav, a rabbi, or a lawyer. That's how you know. So if you're not calling 911, you're not calling a doctor, a lawyer, or a rabbi, you're probably not in danger. It
mm,
could be very distressing, but not dangerous. And if
mm,
there's danger, obviously we have to reach out for our resources.
mhm,
You don't apply this if a child, God forbid, breaks his leg and has to go to the hospital. That's dangerous.
mhm,
Okay, so all of this is fine up until that 3%. And if life is really only 3% dangerous, then why is everybody in that feeling of danger? Okay,
mhm,
and mostly it's because there is no way to separate, because people get overwhelmed by emotions. They just feel like everything is an emotion. Once you begin to separate it out, okay, you surrender to the feeling. There's a issue of surrender and separation and then sweetness,
mm,
about these three. Okay, so we surrender to the feeling because we're not going to change the feeling. This doesn't get changed. The only thing that changes is here. So we surrender to the feeling. That's the first thing. Surrender. I'm feeling this way. What can I do? I don't have to hurt myself over it, and I don't have to hurt anybody else over it. This is just the way I feel. Separate between what's a feeling and what's a fact.
mm,
Is it true that something dangerous will happen? Well, the fact is, I don't know. Okay. And then the sweetness comes with actually doing this process. It's kind of like going to a mind gym, the brain gym, because you're
mm,
training your brain. It's brain training. Just like you go and you develop a muscle at a gym, you develop your mental muscle to be able to use some of these tools in order to separate out what needs to be taken care of and what can be taken care of,
mm,
what cannot be taken care of. So we have to figure it out. And again, with everybody, it's something different. Every personality sees things differently. The general rule is you don't go to the past and you don't go to the future. If you go
mm,
to the past, all that comes up is bitterness and regret. And why did I do it that way? And why couldn't I have done something different? We can't answer it. What was was. That's the
mm,
past. And what's going to be tomorrow is going to be a lot of anxiety
mm,
because we don't know. We don't know what's going to be in the next 5 minutes, let alone tomorrow. So the hardest place to be is really in the present moment. It's really the hardest place for everybody, for me also,
mm.
because the mind tends to go either past or future. How do we stay in the present moment? Really with a breath. In Hebrew, the word for breath is neshima, and that speaks about our neshama. So the only
Mm.
place where we can really be in touch with our neshama is
Our soul.
through this breath.
Mm,
Okay, it's interesting because in Hebrew, the word for present tense is hoveh, hey, vav, hey. Okay, and if you put a yud in front of that, yud is 10, stands for 10. So we have 10 soul powers. When you put 10 soul powers together with the present moment, what do you get? You get God's name, yud,
mm,
hey, vav, and hey.
mm,
It's the only place where we can really do our work vertically. I call it vertical work, meaning between me and Hashem. I have to
mm,
accept my reality. I have to accept my triggers. This is the way that I feel. This is how I was formed and how I led my life. And now I have to add that Hasidus part to it. Okay, the philosophical part, and check out and see, where am I living? Am I living more here or am I living here?
the higher part of the lower part of the brain, right?
Right. In this
Wow.
Egypt, this personal Egypt
Mm,
that we all have.
right. So,
So it also gives meaning to the prayer when you say it every day, that, oh yeah, God is taking us out of Egypt every day. What does that mean?
mm,
To me, it means he helps us get out of this low place where
right.
there's so much judgment, so much
So
separation.
you mentioned judgment. You mentioned judgment before as well. Um, when you talk about judgment, should we not judge our past? Should we not judge our actions? Don't we learn from judging what we've done, how we've done it? To learn
Yeah,
for the
if it's
future.
healthy, yeah, there's healthy judging,
Mm, hmm.
of course, to see where, what are my
What could I
weaknesses?
have done? Right.
What, yeah, where were my weaknesses? Where were my strengths? Of course. That will lead, it depends where it leads you. If it leads you to stay helpless and hopeless, then
Mm,
it's not, it's negative
mm,
judging. But if it leads you to progress
hmm,
and to more self-empowerment and more feeling like, what is our essence? Our essence is that we are created with a soul. Okay, and the soul is part of God. So we have a
mm,
godly soul. For a person not to feel that they have a godly soul, that's the beginning of this descent into nothingness.
mm,
People who will say, I'm a piece of garbage.
mm,
Where did you get that? You're a piece of garbage? I thought you were a precious neshama, a precious
mm,
soul. Sometimes I ask people, did you ever say the word precious to yourself? Do you know how
mm.
precious you are? They've never heard that word.
Wow. Wow.
Never. A lot of people just, either for whatever the reason, the lack of education, or they come from a very too strict of a household, or not no boundaried household. It can be either way.
Either way.
I say we come from it's a very dysfunctional world. Very
That's true.
dysfunctional. And what I say is we have to put the fun into dysfunctional.
Right. So you've been doing, psychotherapy for about 40 years or so. Do you see changes in our society? Why are so many people in therapy nowadays? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think that we've therapized feelings,
What does
okay?
that mean?
Meaning that when people have feelings, everyone's right away trying to fix it with a medication.
Mm,
Or, oh, there's nothing wrong with feeling. There's nothing wrong with feeling depressed. There's nothing wrong with feeling anxious. It just depends on the degree of it. But we're so quick to, I think we have a society that's more interested in comfort than in strength.
mm.
Okay. And we're raising children who cannot bear any discomfort.
Right. Like I think of the previous generation that have gone through so much more, and yet it doesn't seem like they're all in therapy or that they all need therapy. I mean,
Right.
some of them do, some of them don't, but it's not like
Yeah.
they're not functioning.
Look, I think the positive part of it is that people are aware that sometimes you need some education from outside of yourself and your own experiences. Yes, that can be very helpful, but not to just sit with the feelings, not to sit with this, but to try to actually go to that gym, go to the brain gym, and try to work through things so that you end up being 80% here, 20% here,
Mhm.
not 80% here and
On the
20%.
bottom and
Yeah,
20% on the top.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
is there some people who are chronically into therapy that they are constantly searching for new therapies? And is
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like that's like a symptom of our generation. Is it?
Something outside of themselves where they don't have to do too much work. They can go sit in a therapist's office once or twice a
Right.
week. Yeah, this is
Right. I guess
work.
so.
This is hard work. It really is.
Right. So why would they want to keep on sitting in a therapist's office? Because they're not doing the work. They're just getting the comfort and thinking that they're
Yeah.
doing the work.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we have a saying, don't pray for comfort, pray for strength.
Hmm.
Why? If you pray for comfort, it's very temporary. Okay. If I need the air conditioner in the car, but it breaks and I get into the car and I can't bear we didn't always have air conditioning.
Right.
So, So what happens to me? Well, I
Even
can't
in
drive.
Florida, where you were, right?
Even if, right.
Right.
So it means I can't drive because I don't have air conditioning. So a lot of kids would not actually be in a car that way. Because
Mm,
why? They never learned how to bear discomfort.
mm.
Okay. So the idea is when you learn how to bear discomfort, because the discomfort, the feeling of discomfort comes from here. When you learn how to bear that and you
The
say,
lower part of the brain.
the lower, I'm
Hmm.
going to manage, there's no danger if I don't have my comfort right now. But
Mm,
children are not taught that. So I see a whole generation trying to make children happy. You can't
hmm.
make children happy. You can empower them to make themselves happy, but you can't make anybody happy
So
because
how do we teach them that strength rather than comfort? Like we're so busy trying to not have them uncomfortable. And I think ourselves as well. Like we don't want to have that discomfort, whether it's in feelings or situations that we're going through. How do we get used to that discomfort?
so when I um, one of the things I used to do a lot with young clients is when they learned how to bear discomfort, I would give them a little teddy bear.
Ah,
And I'd say, here, put this on your bed. And that's a sign that you really learned how to bear discomfort and that made you so strong.
right.
So when children understand that it's not about the comfort, again, we're talking education all the time.
Hmm.
And parents, Morim are really Horim are Morim. Parents are teachers.
Hmm.
So we really have to teach the child how much courage they have, how brave they are to
Mm,
bear discomfort, okay, and to actually live here instead of here with all the whining and the inability to come to find a good choice. So these are things that we can do with children. We teach them how to find a good choice. I hear the feeling. Yep, you always have to hear their feeling, but then you go to, let's try to find a choice. In other words,
mm,
here's the feeling, and you point it out to them. They can
mm.
actually, a kid of 3 or 4 can actually do this.
Wow.
He can learn to
Amazing.
go from what we call the baby brain,
Hmm.
and this is the adult brain.
Hmm. Wow. Do you see like a change in your practice of what you're dealing with over the last 40 years? Do you see like what do you see as the main issues or the problems that people have are dealing a lot more with now?
I again, I feel like it's always a question of education,
Hmm.
teaching people how to go from, well, if I would outline it with, let's say, 4 stages of dependence, codependence, interdependence, and then independence.
Mm,
So dependent is what children are when they're born till about the age of 10 or so. We're all very dependent on caretakers and, the household around us. Then when we go to school, we become very codependent, meaning we're always looking about how does that person see me?
mm,
Does my teacher like me? Do I get enough? Am I doing enough? Am I popular? Am I in the popular group? Am I not? Am I being bullied? There's so many things that go on because of the peer. So that's
mhm,
codependence. And actually, most people don't graduate out of
mm,
codependence to interdependence, meaning we get married and then we should be interdependent, a husband on a wife and a wife on a husband. Interdependent, not codependent,
mm,
but interdependent, which is a healthy dependency. And then finally, after 40 or 50, you can go to independence. You'll stay inter, but also go to independence. But
mm,
what I'm finding is that a lot of people just get stuck at that codependent place. And 40 years later or 60 years later, they're still saying, oh, my sister-in-law doesn't talk to me, and this
mm.
one did this, and my kids this. And it's all about what's outer environment doing
To me, right.
to me, but really we're doing it to ourselves because we don't
Mm,
have the education. So once a person has education, I taught for 25 years before I did counseling. So I'm big on education
yeah.
because I think that's where it's at. But I see the kids are not getting this emotional education at school. They don't get it in their home. Where are they supposed to get their emotional education?
So what should a parent do or what should a person do, for their own self? I mean, I think there's so many people who are codependent with the
Yeah,
internet, with social media.
of
There's
course.
we're always comparing ourselves to other people. That's codependency. How do we get out of that?
So there are quite a few resources. Um, If people don't like to read, they don't have to read anymore. They can just get it on YouTube. Look up
Right.
look up codependency. There's a book called The Disease to Please.
Mm,
It's a real disease to
mhm,
please everybody, but not me. Okay,
mm,
no self-care for me because I'm busy taking care of everybody around. I'm very codependent to what their needs are. And very often I'll see mothers who have no idea that they are even allowed to take a nap for a half an hour if they need to,
mm,
because they're busy taking care of things on the outside. So just education, I would say. And I think it really behooves parents to get in touch with what we call EQ. EQ is emotional intelligence. IQ is school intelligence, intellectual intelligence, but that they're going to get in school anyways. Okay.
mm,
It's not who's the best in the class or who's the top boy in the yeshiva. It's, does this person have emotional intelligence? Meaning they can manage discomfort, meaning they're not into shame and blame and judgment,
mm,
meaning they know how to have a relationship. They know how to empower themselves and the people they're with. They're positive. They see life from a positive point of view and they know why they're here in this world. That's emotional intelligence.
mm. You mentioned like self-care, but sometimes you feel like, our generation is so into the self-care, into themselves.
Well, like
You know,
anything, if it doesn't
has the
follow,
pendulum like swung in that way?
yeah, yeah, sometimes for sure. Yeah.
And what's the cause of that? And how do we change that? Like what are you
Uh,
seeing in your practice?
Very often it's running away from feelings. Very often it feels like
Mm-hmm.
entitlement,
Mm-hmm.
and the inability to bear discomfort. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll take that away. I'll take away the discomfort by getting super involved with all kinds of things that I need to do for me. It's the ego thing.
Mm.
And there's a healthy part of the ego, but then there's a excessive part.
Are we too focused on ourselves? Like I'll just explain to you. Like I know years ago, my daughter came home from high school, and she's like, that they're always asking us if we're happy, because it was very into like suicide training and all that at the
Oh,
point, how we're feeling. Are we happy? Are we okay? And she's like, I'm a teenager. I'm not supposed to be happy all the
you got it.
time.
You got it.
I'm going
That's
to feel
right.
down. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me. Are we like,
I
so
would
that's
not
why
ask that. I would not ask that question. I would ask better, do you feel strong? Not
mm,
are you happy, but do you feel strong? Where do you feel strong? What are
mhm,
you having a hard time with? Where do you feel weak?
mhm. So
Okay,
is this what we should be asking ourselves, that these kind of
strength.
questions?
Yeah, where's
Strength.
the strength? Where's the strength? What do we have to teach other people? How do we bring light to our own lives? How do we
Mm,
bring light to other people's lives? How do we do
mhm,
that? And what's the focus? So, of course, there has to be a healthy sense of self, but
mhm,
there's always this, it always has to be balanced with a healthy sense of what do other people need and what are their sensitivities.
mhm,
So it's really easy. I call it like, like you're going on a road, you've got a GPS and it's telling you how to go. And we think we can outsmart it sometimes. I know I do.
right. Sure.
Like, man, she doesn't know the best way. I know the better way.
Yeah.
So we go off the road, but without judgment, without blame and shame and judgment, she'll just say rerouting,
Right.
okay? Which is beautiful. I love that. It's so nice. It reminds me of what I need to be doing for myself and for other people, just in a very non-judgmental way, just to reroute, gently come back to the main road. What is the main road? I call it vertical living. There's horizontal and there's vertical. Horizontal is what is everybody around me feeling and doing
Mm,
in all of my comparisons and all of my jealousies or whatever they are. Okay. And how does everybody else judge me? Vertical is where's my own strength? Where's my
mm,
relationship to God? Where's my relationship to what my vision is for a healthy life? How do I live that? And am I being authentic and honest with myself?
mm.
So there are people who live this way 80, 90% of the time. They
Right.
they don't even give breath a moment to connect because who's giving us the breath? We're not giving ourselves the breath. Every
Right.
breath comes from God.
Mm,
So if I'm living vertically, I'm going to have an awareness. on a daily basis, and an awareness of all my challenges, and my getting down to that place of Egypt again, and getting out again, and experiencing, the crossing of the Red Sea. Yeah, tough stuff.
Wow. Very tough. And if you don't feel you're being strong, I guess you just take it one step at a time. And
Yeah.
if you don't feel that relationship with God, you just work on it. You work on developing, cultivating
Not
it.
necessarily work. Sometimes I just have to be patient and know that it's a mood, or it's a feeling, and feelings are like the ocean. They come, they go, the waves come in, they go out. That's the way feelings are. Fact is fact. Feelings
Mm,
change.
mm,
This doesn't change.
mhm. Wow.
I mean, it does change because it's the only thing I personally can change. I can't change this. It's going to be like the waves of the ocean.
Right.
And, it's a very, why do people feel calm by the ocean? Because, oh, they can really be one with that. So here the wave is coming in and it's going out, and it's
Mm.
coming in and it's going out. I've actually taken clients just to sit by the ocean.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and just experience what that feels like. Let it be. Let the feeling be. You don't have to judge it. And there's no danger, even though they feel the danger, either the depression of the past or the anxiety of the future. So all we have to do is breathe and be one with the ocean. That's nice.
Hmm.
It's very calming.
It is calming. Wow. Mrs. Yehudis Karbal, you gave us so much food for thought, so much wisdom in this
Thank you.
in this interview. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any closing words that you'd want to share with people, or tell people that what you help them to get, that they will gain from this interview?
I think it's just about growth. It's always about growth. Where was I today? What will I be tomorrow? How do I help myself stay in this place of equilibrium and balance without going off to the side roads and having to keep
Mm.
coming back? Um, to me, it's about the growth. It's interesting, when I was doing my master's work, we had a class in career assessment, and we all had to take a test. So my test came out that I would be very good as a teacher, a therapist, or a gardener.
Really? Wow. Do you
Because I
do
like to
gardening?
see, because I like what?
Do you do gardening?
No, with people, yeah.
With people.
Right,
Okay.
because I like to see things grow.
Grow, right.
So to me, that's where it's at. That no matter where we have been,
Do
and
you
no
ever have a
matter
client that you see is not growing, that you say you're not really helping them?
right, when that happens, and I'm very selfish because I like to see things grow. So,
Yeah.
so if I see that somebody is just really stuck and wanting to do that, the merry-go-round kind of thing, and I can't convince them that it's not about dealing with all the feelings constantly, but there's work to be done, which is why I give homework also. I did as a teacher and I do as a therapist.
Wow.
I give homework because then they can see themselves if they're growing. That's what
Right.
I want to do. My whole method really is to empower people to find their own godliness, to find their own talents and what they have to bring to this world, because it's not
Beautiful.
about what I'm doing, it's what they need to be doing.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mrs.
Thank
Yehudis
you.
Karbal.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
the
so much for
opportunity.
your words of wisdom.
I appreciate.
May you have continued success in gardening.
Amen. You
Beautiful
too. Thank you.
garden. Thanks.
Okay.
What a fascinating interview with Mrs. Yehudis Karbal. I found her so much gems of wisdom in this conversation, so many things that we can use in our own lives to really learn how to navigate the emotions that we're feeling, going from that lower brain to the higher brain, and what I really loved most was how she synthesized this with Jewish thought, with Hasidic teachings, and how she sees it all as one, how she does use faith in her practice, and how she feels that that is such a necessary thing. I really enjoyed how she described the horizontal living versus the vertical living, and how that is really something that we should all be striving to achieve, that vertical living in our relationship with God, and reaching higher and being ourselves rather than comparing ourselves to others all the time. And how she explained that so many people are still in the codependency stage, where we are comparing ourselves to the outside world and to others around us, like we often do in school, but we never graduate from that. And it just becomes new comparisons as we get older. I found that very fascinating. I really, really appreciated how she spoke about the importance in our generation of developing strength versus comfort, and how we can really ask ourselves, are we strong? How are we growing in our strength, rather than are we happy or are we comfortable? I'd love to hear which parts of this interview you enjoyed. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. If you are not subscribed, please make sure that you do subscribe to Chabad.org/extraordinary. You'll get these right in your inbox. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube if that's where you're following us. Please drop us a line. Tell us what you think. Please share with your friends. Let them know about this podcast. Let them know about joining in the podcast and subscribing for it. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this extraordinary community.